Hello, hello, hello. I am interested today in asking you a question. Are you really a truth seeker? Or are you truly looking for a reduction in your psychological pain? And I think all pain is psychological. We can have, of course, many horrible, awful situations, but it's the meaning we make, how we respond, that makes it awful or bearable. Now, if you're like me, you might answer that question with, well, I want both. I'm interested in the truth, and I'm hoping that the truth is going to bring me psychological freedom. But I think unless we're willing to go all the way for truth, things like loyalty to our parents, conditioning, repetition, we'll probably get drawn back as soon as we feel just a little better. Have you ever noticed that when you're hurting, you're more diligent with your spiritual practice? You're more willing to follow the principles of a course? That's very human. It's very typical. But I think that strengthening our desire to know the truth, the mystics, even when they're on different paths, were known for the expression self-inquiry. What does that mean? I'm sure they knew each other and themselves about as well as we do. They saw their patterns. They probably saw their attack thoughts. They saw their suffering. Why were they doing what was called self-inquiry or even meditation? Meditation is usually to stop the thoughts and the feelings and the looping so that we can find out what's underneath. We could say, who are we? I think it's more beneficial to think or ask, what are we? Because who in the early stages tends to bring up, I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a good person, I'm a good listener, I look this way, I'm many years old, I have a body, my body's doing this and that. That's who. Characteristics come up. But what are we? Opens up the possibility that we're something more than these concrete people with limited personal beliefs. Have you ever heard the expression, whatever you believe, you're right? How can that be? There's a lawyer who trained Donald Trump some years ago in some very effective strategies. His name was Roy Cohn, and I may have mentioned him on an earlier radio show or video on YouTube. But Roy Cohn, and I don't think he was the originator of it, but he was the one who honed it into a financially lucrative practice. And he found out that the human brain, if something is repeated enough, we will believe it's true. Even if we first heard it and said, that can't be, or like with election fraud, it was repeated and repeated, and some very good people believed it because it was so often repeated by the news channels that they watch, the political leaders that they endorsed, and nobody likes to be wrong. So if they voted for a certain party and election fraud before, or those people who are now espousing election fraud, doesn't matter if every court threw it out. It doesn't matter if they actually believe in democracy. This is not a political discussion. This is about the psychology of us as humans. And this is not if you're a Donald Trump person or you're against Donald Trump. This is true of all of us. I'm just using that as an example. Course in Miracles says in the beginning, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Therein lies the peace of God. So what does that mean? I see many people who are not just Course in Miracles students. I do a class on glimpses of awakening. So I get Course in Miracles people, and I get people who fight A Course in Miracles. They've left because of this last line, the second to the last line I read. Nothing unreal exists. I believe, and I can't know this, but I believe that what was meant by this was that the real world is beyond bodies. It's beyond birth and death. So it's not saying that we're just imagining an existence. I think it's saying that the temporal, limited ego world that we're protecting is not our real selves. That's my interpretation of it. What does that first line mean? Nothing real can be threatened. How can you threaten energy if what we are is an amorphous, formless, unlimited, potential, powerful, without investment in opinions, preferences, thoughts, and feelings? just energy, which is what quantum physics says we are. Now, when I ask you, are you a truth seeker, or do you want to just hurt less? If you were told by very well-meaning people, your parents, aunts and uncles, parents, friends, the culture, some things that were wrong. They were lies, but not intentional lies. So they were incorrect statements. They were repeating what they believed they are. What was that? What were we taught? We're taught that we have to get everything that's good. We have to control everything, that we even create life and death, that we're responsible. We can fool around with our fertility only to some degree if we tell the truth. Only to some degree. Tell that we control our birth to some fertility patients who have not been able to conceive or hold a baby, or to a mother and father and sister and brother who've lost a sibling or a child through death. The truth is, we have a limited, this is my truth. I live with it as though I know it. It may not be what you believe. So belief becomes truth when it's my experience that I know it. I know we cannot control life, as well as I know that my daughter Melissa is no longer alive, as well as I didn't even control this day. I don't actually control even what I eat. I think I do. I like to believe I do. I'm told that that's true. But how many times have you ever said, I'm not going to eat this again? And you 100% believe it. And then tomorrow you're eating it again. Or you say, I'm going to eat less of it. And then you maybe eat more of it. Come on, tell the truth. And if it's not about food, if food isn't your thing, what about other things? You're not going to watch Netflix until blah, 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 and then you turn it on. Or if you're super organized and disciplined, how do you fall off the thought wagon? Almost everybody does. There are a few people who are so rigid and highly disciplined that they always do what they say they're going to do. Now, there are occasionally some areas where it's never a struggle and you never break the rule. So maybe somebody's a vegetarian and they came at it not from the mental judgment, but from the heart place of, I really don't want to eat meat or animals ever again. It hurts my humanity to eat meat, any kind of living creature that has eyes. I believe you'll never touch it again. That might be. That's different. And in that case, I believe that you were supposed to have that felt sense, that intuition, that for you, there was going to be no more eyes ingested in your eyes, meaning even if you don't eat the eyes, the fish had eyes, the animal had eyes. Can you feel the difference between a rule and a movement that came from inside, that you're no longer going to do this or that, or you are going to do this or that? But here's the but. I'm banking on one of those people that, let's say, is a vegetarian. They have another area of their lives where maybe they said they're not going to judge anybody again. And the next thing out of their mouth is a judgment. So if you want to really understand what I'm saying and not be limited by the details of my example, you'll see, where does this apply to you? In what form? So we fool ourselves. Why? Why do we want to believe that we're in control of everything? We want to believe it because we're taught it. We're taught that our happiness is involved with getting things and controlling our lives. We use the word responsibility, but we often mean control. Nobody's going to get it for you. Actually, things will be coming to you, even if you don't go get them. That's been my experience. And it's even better when it comes that way. Who here thinks that it is tiring and tiresome? Raise your hand if you agree that it is tiresome to try to control life. Now, if I sit back on the couch, you might say, how am I going to get a job? If you're supposed to get a job, you will undo the rule to sit in the couch, and you will look in the paper or whatever the way is online to find jobs. Or you'll go to a cocktail party or meet someone and they'll tell you about the job. Hey, I'm looking for someone such and such. Do you know anybody? And then you might say, me. I've had that experience so often in my life. And because I'm not a great believer in marketing, I know the world believes in marketing. But I remember saying to my husband, and he's not necessarily a thought leader in this kind of area. He might be more, it's up to you to get the job or build the business. And I remember walking, and I had been home with children for a number of years, taking care of them when they were young. And I said, I have the felt sense that I'm going to have a private practice psychology program and practice. And I'm not going to do anything to get it. And he said, I believe you. Neither of us knew how this could happen. I may have told this story once before, but there are different listeners listening now. So I'm indulging myself in telling it again. And this was in the late 80s. I know I'm revealing my age, and that's fine with me. And I was asked by the Unity Church if I would come and facilitate a discussion of the John Bradshaw family dynamic tapes. Those were videotapes at those time. I think they were VHS tapes. That's how long ago they were. They were before DVDs. And I said, sure. And I didn't ask for any money. And what happened? The minister fell in love with what I said during the Q&A discussions. And so he started sending me clients, and my practice was built. After that, all my referrals were self-referrals from clients. I didn't know the other therapists in town, so they weren't going to send me anyone. And by the time that referral source changed, something happened for the minister. I don't remember, but it was another connection that just filled my practice. And I always had just the right number of clients. And every time I learned a new specialty, like eye movement desensitization, I had people who were traumatized next that needed it. Or if I learned childhood trauma, I would get clients next for that. Or if it was eating disorders, it was always that way in my over 30 years being a psychologist or a psychotherapist. I'm actually an MSW social worker, but people often call me a psychologist, so I slipped and called myself that. And by the way, I don't have my license anymore. I gave it up. And now I call myself a oneness coach because that feels like it more represents. I wish to go beyond the psychological suffering into the oneness. So let's talk a little bit in our maybe 5 minutes that we have left. How can we get to the oneness? How can we get out of psychological suffering, which is all about the meaning the personal self has made over a situation, ourselves, or our future? The situation includes the past, because it's when we're truly experiencing the one present. We haven't even made the judgments yet. We're just experiencing it. And by the time we've evaluated the situation that we're going through in the apparent now, we've already lost the radical now, because it's already the past. It's already happened. We now have an evaluation or judgment. So let's take a moment and think of the last time you evaluated something. You said, this is what this other person thought. And can you believe that's what they did to me? Or I wish they hadn't done that. Or my day would be so different if X, Y, and Z. Even if it's you have a pain, your judgment of that pain is that you'd be better off without it. If you just experience the pain, let's say it's toothache, that's worse than a headache to me. Now let's imagine we have a headache or a toothache. I don't know about you, but I'm tightening up because if I think I don't want this toothache, I'm in a fight with the tooth. But if I think, oh, the universe has sent me a toothache, let me open to it. What does it feel like? It feels softer. Less intimate than when I was fighting. It feels more intimate when I'm relaxing. So a fight is very intense. I don't want this. Why do I have this? What did I do? What caused this? How can I get rid of it? It's very intense. But if I open to it, it's also intimate, but there's a letting go. It's wider than when my experience, my awareness of the toothache or me having a toothache, it's wider when I don't fight and I allow the toothache. Doesn't mean I won't call a dentist or take some painkiller. How do you feel now? When you're the limited self that you were taught you are, it's all up to you to get rid of the toothache and to find the cause and maybe blame yourself for why this tooth went bad. But if you're something bigger, you might have to part with what you've been taught and go to the unfamiliar, wider sense. You won't have a name for it yet. You can give it a name. But the you that's experiencing the toothache from a wider place, I would say is a different you and is unfamiliar. And it's a truth because that wider space is always open and available on any subject. I'm calling it truth because it's not fleeting. When the thoughts flee away, we're still here. So what we are is something more lasting. And so I know our time is up. To be continued, my friends. What if truth was more like a country song? 3 chords and the truth. What if what you are is more like something simple like that, rather than these complicated, limited ideas of what we've been taught and what you thought you are? Namaste, my friends.